Ta-da. How's everybody doing? Doing good. Let me get some stuff set up so we can get ourselves in there. Of course, let me put this in there so we all know. We are doing readings today. We're doing readings. We're doing readings. We're doing readings. Put a lot of readings in there like that right there. Let's do some invitations. Get everybody in there. Let's go through. Once again, as I always say, don't feel any type of way if I didn't click your name and send you an invite. We're getting used to bringing in the invitations of the ones that are used to it, the ones that are ready coming to the space. Come in. I'm going to start with some announcements. I'm going to start with some announcements and we're going to build from there. Welcome to another Papa Mondays. You know, Papa Mondays is very rare. As we are gearing up, you know, getting those gears set for the upcoming class in August. Get some Palo Santo in your life. Get some Palo Santo in your life. Get some Palo Santo in your life. Get it in your life. Get it in your life. We got them new things on the new things with the new things and the new things with the new things. Memorializing mortality. If I were to ask you your communication style, one of the things I've been going over with a lot of my clients over the last couple of weeks is communication style. What's your communication style? Before we get into that, wait while it's filling up. I'm going to get into these announcements. Real quick. Yeah, we don't get into these announcements really quick. I do have a special. We do have a specialized price. You've been thinking about getting a consultation with me. We do got a special price going on until Wednesday. The price is available till Wednesday, early AM Thursday. But you can, let's say for an example, you can lock in the price. The price for the usual price, if you're not familiar, the usual price for a consultation with me, it's a virtual consultation. It's about 3 hours max. It's 3 hours max. If you are interested in, let's say you're interested in getting a consultation. Let's say you only have an hour to spare for the initial part of your consultation. We can do that. We can set it up to where first hour and a half, we have a consultation, the first hour and a half, and then we set up the next day, at least 2-3 days out. We're going to go 2-3 days out on that. But we have the other half of the consultation. Consultation is $90. Got it on special for $90. The original consultation price is $125. It's virtual. So I said, hey, whether you coming in now, you come back and look back at this video. If you get this video before Wednesday, hit me in the inbox, and we can set that. We can get you set up. We can get you set up squared away. Get you some more information on that. Upcoming class, Tantra and Healing 888. The upcoming class is available. The first day of class is August 5th. 2 special prices, which leads into the consultation price. Let's use this as an example. For clients, it's $60. For clients to get locked in to the class is a 4 to 5 week class. It's all virtual. That means you ain't got to travel, no plane tickets, none of that, whatever. You ain't got to do all that. Virtual. You get a link before every class. You get the lesson plan before every class, and then we go in from there. Tantra healing, we're getting into communication styles. We're getting into understanding. We're getting into the aspects of understanding how the energy, Tantra means to loom, and how you're looming your energy. What energy you taking into a space, which led into today. I want to get into what I want to title today. If you're familiar with me and you rock with me and you're working with me, you know that every session, towards the middle, sometimes at the beginning, towards the middle, towards the end of the session, we usually have a title for it. We usually, if you've been working with me, you've been my client, you've been working with me, you know that usually towards the middle of the session, we have a title for the session. We have a title for the session. We have a marquee for the session. We have that title for the session. And that's important. This is important because it allows us, when we're working in the sessions, it allows us to actually have a beginning. Remember, I'm very big on every time we meet up, every time I'm meeting up, we having a conversation. I'm very big on that in my own life. Every time I'm having a conversation, that conversation is being had. A lot of times for us, when we sitting in that space, what if you don't know your communication style? Ask a couple questions as we allow her to fill in. What if you don't know your communication style, so to speak? What if your communication style is you like examples? You can hear it, you can hear the conversation, but you need examples. You need the movie references. You need song references. You need some type of visual aid. That would mean you have a more indirect, that might be your comprehension style. Let's start there. That might be your comprehension style. Your comprehension style may be very indirect. Indirect meaning in order for you to comprehend, in order for you to process it, everything from the amount of time that you need to process and how you process it, that's all in the comprehension. Now, you may have a very direct communication style. That means what you say sounds very matter-of-factly. That means once you said it, it's pretty much set in stone. Here's the thing. A lot of times when it comes to our standard operating agreement, how we're trying to manifest things in our life, how we're trying to bring things into our life, a lot of times new goals, new objectives, new ways of facilitating. We look at the goal and we see the goal and we try to visualize the goal, put the goal together. This is my goal, that in the next couple of months I'm going to be like this, this, and this. But we don't look at our system. One of my biggest things that I had to learn with myself in my process of shifting and transitioning, one of my favorite lines my mentor taught me was, nigga, nobody knows you, is understanding that system. Is understanding what that system is. Understanding that it doesn't matter what goal you set. Weight loss, studies, new job, whatever it is, relationship, whatever goals you have. Doesn't matter if your systems are not up to par. Your systems are your habits and your patterns. The roots to your systems are your behaviors, those emotions, those feelings. You may be very well the person that when you say you want this, the person that when you're saying you want to do something new, you want to step into that box, you want to put that work in, you may be very well willing to do it. The will is there. The infatuation is there for it. But then as you start to go through the process, you feel me? That system kicks in. When you're going through that process, that old system kicks in. You know what I'm saying? That old system kicks in. The way that you used to do it, how you're used to doing it, down to even, not only, think about it like this, even to the aspect of how you're used to doing something when we think about the aspect of time. Use an example. If I'm sitting inside of my space and I know that the thing that I'm about to tap into, the thing that I'm about to do requires, let's use that as an example. Let's say there's something that you're wanting to do and it requires you to wake up early. Let's say it requires you to wake up at 7 a.m., 6 a.m., 4 a.m. It requires you to wake up early. If none of let's say your goal is to wake up early. If none of your systems, if none of the aspects inside of your system are in a place to reassure that, to reinforce that, to reinforce and facilitate you waking up early, as an example. It doesn't matter what goal you put in that place. If the system is not in place, if the system has not been assessed, if the skill set has not been assessed, if your standard operating practice has not been assessed, it doesn't matter what goal you have, what objective you have. The first thing that's going to happen in most of these cases is you're going to simply remember the last time that you wanted to go for that goal. The last time you wanted to go for that goal, the last time you wanted to hit that goal, the last time you wanted to hit that mark, the last time you wanted to hit that space, the last fast that you had only lasted 3 days and something came up. Here's some assessing questions. Remember, we got to ask, one of the biggest things that when I'm working with my clients, whether you are in full therapy, whether you're in mentorship, whether you're in the state of advisory, whichever one it may be, one of the biggest things is whenever we're introducing something new into our system, we got to ask what it is. We got to ask what we know. One of the biggest things when we're activating these systems, when we're putting ourselves into these places, we got to ask what we know. What do I know about this space? And the reason that this is so important while we're creating that communication style is because you've been using your communication style based on that skill set, based on those habits, based on those patterns. Remember how I always say your behavior creates how you interact with your system, interact with your environment. Your patterns facilitate and populate that environment. That means if you have let's say you got a badass attitude, moody ass attitude, you're not a wake up in the AM person, you're not a wake up early person. That's part of your behavior system, part of that behavior process. That means everything that populates based on your pattern of you not being an AM person is going to be populated based on your pattern. That goes into the text messages, the text message you get, that text message that you get at 8 o'clock, knowing damn well that text message that comes on at 8 o'clock, that disturbs your sleep. That phone call that comes in, or that message that's been dinging, waiting for the do not disturb to go off, comes through. The aspect of that's the aspects of those patterns that populate that space. That friend that calls you all the time, that relative, whatever it may be, whoever you laying next to, all those things come into play. You know what I'm saying? Then your habits are what feed those patterns. We talk about this all the time. Your habits are what feed those patterns. Your habits are what feed those patterns. So a lot of times when you're thinking about adjusting to a new goal or a new objective, there's a process. There's a process that you have to look. There's always a process that we have to go through. One of the hardest things about us going through these processes or moving through these processes is the process. Understanding why you did it in the first place. Accepting why you did it in the first place. This goes into the aspects of a lot of times from this space, we like to memorialize the mortality. We like to memorialize our habits. We like to memorialize our patterns. We like to memorialize the behavior. And we memorialize it, or we bring it into memory, but we are not really sitting with the feelings, the feeling and the emotions, the energetics that are behind it. Why do you go into that space? What did you learn? What have you learned about that space? Are you even, use an example? One of the biggest examples that I work through with my when I'm working with clients is, why did that become your habit? Why did that become your habit? Is your habit based on building and growing based on substance, or is it based on simulation? There's a difference between, I use this example a lot. In the beginning of me doing lives, when I was doing Friday night lectures back in my beginnings when I started my YouTube channel, I started falling into the pocket slowly but surely of how I would set up my day. Friday night lectures was at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. But I spent the week, if not the 2 week, that week before, planning out and learning how to plan, learning how to set the plan, learning how to create treatments, setting the plan of what I was going to be speaking on, notes, bullet points, jokes to slide in there, the humor. We understand the aspects of humor. Putting these pieces into place. That way by Friday, most days, when I wake up on Friday, everything was starting to become in sync, because on every Friday, that's when I was going to the metaphysical shop. That's when I was grabbing that's when I was grabbing candles. That's when I was grabbing if I had to go get new herbs, candles, incense, whatever I needed to get, I would get that day. Even to the aspects of the alcohol I would drink during a live. If I was going to be smoking my herbs, or I was going to smoke a cigar during, all of these things were coming into that place. Now, the only way that I could use these things in that space was understanding the habit that they were connected to, the pattern in which they were connected to, the behaviors in which they were connected to. Was I sipping? Do I drink, like, use an example, do I drink more water, or do I drink more when I'm nervous? Do I smoke more when I'm nervous? When I'm looking at myself in the camera, in the screen, am I giving direct eye contact? Am I paying attention to the comments as the comments come in? These things come into play. All of these come into play as you're creating that new standard operating procedure. Anything that you're trying to manifest, one of my biggest things, we talk about manifestation. As you're manifesting, bringing things into your environment, everything you do from the point of saying, this is what I desire to have next. That seed of that initial thought being planted is going to first feed on what's already present. It's going to bring, that's why I tell people this all the time. You can sit here and do an entire candle ritual for abundance and prosperity. If you believe in if you lock into the paradox of, I'm not abundant, and I'm trusting that I am not abundant yet, whether you unconsciously or consciously subscribe to this thought process, it's going to go into play. When you're consciously in that process, that means you're like, okay, cool. This is what I got to look at. What am I abundant in? What am I grateful for? What am I in gratitude for? When you're in that space, you automatically look at, damn, I have been abundant in BS. I have been abundant in distracting. I've been abundant in distracting myself. I've been abundant in, those are the blockages. Those are the block. You have to acknowledge the blockages. The biggest thing in the aspect of shifting your process is acknowledging the blockages. You're already abundant. Remember, I've said we're going to get deep into this in class. Every relationship's healthy based on your level of awareness. Every level, your abundance is always there based on your level of awareness. Your gratitude is there based on your level of awareness. Everything is based on that level of that self-awareness, that acknowledging self, that accepting self, understanding the assessment of self, the apology to yourself, the forgiveness of others to yourself, forgiving others, apologies, and thanking those other aspects that happened in your life in order for you to come to the point where you're at now. Because everything is a precursor. So many times, and I deal with this when I'm working with new clients, pre-clients inside of that space, we get into that space to where I want something new. I want this and I want this. And the reason that I want it, and you got to look at the reason that you want it. We talked about this the other week. It's okay to want something. It's okay to feel something. It's okay to have those non-negotiables. It's okay to have those. But when you're looking at those non-negotiables, why are they there? Why did you, use an example. Why did you put in those non-negotiables? Why are those your non-negotiables? Why are those your standards? Why is that your operations agreement? Why is your communication style so prevalent? Are you listening? Are you constantly, use an example for distraction. If you're constantly inside spaces to where every time you have a conversation with somebody, they're always in a state of, they're to what at a certain point in time, a level of awareness, give it an example, your level of awareness for your friends to vent, your level of awareness for your family to vent, associates to vent. At one level to where it was venting based on a level of awareness with yourself, understanding yourself, you're getting yourself healthy. I'm going to give you an example to bring it all together, working with yourself and things of that nature. At that point, with that level of awareness that you have within yourself in that process, that was venting. Because you would listen, you be the ear for them, you be the ear for them to talk to, you give them your opinion, suggestion, then you go from there. But here's a little tidbit. Let's say, for example, that was based on every night when you got off. Let's say you get off at night and you're getting home and now you want to discover decompressing. Let's say I remember discovering the process and the importance of decompression. The importance of decompression. Let's use that as an example. The importance of decompression. Now, my first time decompressing and consciously setting the tone of I am going to decompress today. I'm going to spend 15, 20 minutes to learn and go through this process of decompression. The first time that I went through that first state of decompression, everybody hit my phone. Every message came through. Every reel looked appeasing. Every TikTok video looked good. Every YouTube video looked good. Food tasted so good after 8 o'clock. Everything seemed to fit. But then I started realizing it wasn't that it just started. This is the thing that gets us mixed up. It didn't just start happening. My behaviors gave me the way that I interacted with my environment. My patterns populated my environment, and my habits fed those patterns that reinforced those behaviors. So if I'm not used to even sitting with myself for 5 to 10 minutes without getting too far in my head, without understanding an exercise such as let me write these things out. Let me honor it by writing. Let me draw. Let me color. Even if I do watch a show, even if I am watching a show or watching TV or watching something on YouTube, there's a reason behind it inside of that space. There's always been a reason behind it. But if I'm not accustomed to this, then how's my decompression going to look? My first levels of decompression is going to be met with the blockages that block me from decompressing. The same blockages that stop me from decompression, and this is how you create that new space, that new environment in the now, being present. The same things that stop me from decompressing, that means the release, that means the sitting, that means the allowing myself to flow through this energy and putting it to that space, are the same exact things, if not more or an equivalent, to what are going to stop me from waking up early for meditation, to waking me up early for self-reflection, to wake me up early to start my day. You feel what I'm saying? And then this is going to affect in the long run to where if for some reason, whatever the reason may be, let's say I stop waking up at a certain time and I start waking up at this time. If this is this is where we beat ourselves up. You started waking up early and then all of a sudden you started waking up a little bit later. And then since you were beating yourself up or you came into that space because the decompression was not the decompress, I'm going to get a reason why decompressing is so important. Now you're feeling guilty. You're feeling guilty out of nowhere. You're feeling doubt out of nowhere. You can't do it. You wasted too much time. I got to start again all over again. You go through all these processes. This is because in your decompression, you're not taking a self-inventory of the day. This is because in decompression, this is when you're taking an inventory of the day. One of my biggest things when I take that decompression at the end of my day, that means using it as an example. My last session for the day is at 4:30. My last session for the day is at 4:30. It's going to run until about 6 o'clock. That means at 6:30, that's when I start my decompression. Now, 6:30 to 7, I'm pushing and working on not eating after 7. So, boom, at 6:30, that's when I'm going to start. If I'm going to eat something, I'm going to eat something then if I don't eat it in between sessions. So now when I'm sitting inside that space from 6:30 till about 9, 10 o'clock, I fully went through my decompression. Here's the key. I've talked about this before. My wake up to myself is about 4 to 6 hours. Now, in that space, in the recent aspects of growth, there are now people, places, things, these items are in the new space, that now facilitate reinforcing why it's important for me. My standard of operations is in place. My system is in place for me. The hardest thing for us in that space, especially when working on new processes, you're talking about introducing new relationships, whether it be love, interest, friends, whatever it may be, you're introducing these things back into your space, is understanding that your system is for you. Your system is for you. Your system is for you. Your standard operation procedure is for you. Once we understand that is who I am and that's intangible. My standard operating procedures are for me and for me alone. Once I understand this, once I've sat with this part and processed it, it made it a greater, easier transition and transmuting. And when other people came into that space, you feel what I'm saying? Because your system for yourself creates the infrastructure is the infrastructure that others will see. Use an example. A lot of times you're used to impractical solutions. You're used to impractical things. You're used to You use an example. You can look and see. Remember, I've talked about this before. I'm going to this all the time. Your infrastructure is 10%, is that 10% of visibility. Your infrastructure is the 10% of the visibility. That means everything from your grooming techniques. Think of once you get his game, your grooming routine and your self-care routine are two different things. Your self-care routine is a part of your system. Your grooming is a part of how you demonstrate your infrastructure. You feel what I'm saying? Your self-care routine is a part of your system, my system. My self-care routine is a part of my system. Every other Sunday when I cut my hair, the following Sunday, I don't skip that part of the system. There's another part inside of that system, which would be me lining up my beard, conditioning my beard. It might be me washing my hair. It's things of that nature, along with along with washing laundry, grocery shopping. A lot of those things, those are part of the infrastructure of grooming. See why I'm realizing why it's so important. Those are the systems of the aspects of grooming. So now everything that comes into my space, my infrastructure, in order to align with first, they must align with it in some way, shape, or form. That's on them. And that's going to be learned through looking in the alignment with my infrastructure. My communication style. You feel what I'm saying? My communication style. How I communicate. When I communicate. My communication style. Is it direct? My comprehension style. Is it direct? For me being a holistic therapist, I have now learned that I've learned the different communication styles and the different comprehension styles and the different learning styles. So I'm no longer inside of a space to where if I'm having a conversation with somebody, this is where we think about you listen more and you speak less. This is why you listen more and you speak less, coming from that heart space, the compassion space. You're coming from a space of understanding. Listen to how somebody thinks. Listen to how somebody talks. It's not so much what they think about or what they think about or what they talk about. It's about how they talk about it and how they speak about it and how they stand on it. You can meet somebody, use an example. You can meet somebody that has a passion for shoes. Use that as an example. They have a passion for shoes. The way that they break down how they love shoes. They got a passion, or they're a connoisseur of different herbs. They're a connoisseur of different drinks, different foods. The way is how they explain it, how they bring this captivating notion to it. You may have no interest in whatever they're talking about, but the simple pull and captivation that you had in sitting there in that space to listen to what they were speaking about, it says a lot about your comprehension style. This is going to trigger, this is when we look at it, we usually get triggered by communicate first, comprehend last. But if I'm going into a space, ultimately listening, the listener, the observer, I'm going in based on listening. I'm going in based on observing. I'm looking at their body language. I'm learning body language. I'm learning their body language. I'm learning how they relax when they say certain things. I'm learning that if they're having a conversation and it does peak up, they're still living inside of that moment. So I allow them. So 9 times out of 10, when you're listening to your partner, you're listening to them and you give them the reminder, so to speak. You give them that reminder. That, remember, babe, you're not there anymore. Just stay present. And you allow them to have that moment. One of the biggest things when I'm working with my clients is I understand that the emotional impulse is only 90 seconds. That feeling that comes to the surface, that anger, that doubt, that disrespect, whatever it may be, when it comes to the surface, that is only 90 seconds. What happens after that is testing on their level of awareness, and their level of awareness, which triggers their level of ability and capacity, or their inability, and lack of capacity for the ability to be able to process. I'm in the session. I can tell when someone has never, I can tell because when a person repeats certain things, I can tell if you say you're sorry after everything that you say. I can navigate that and help. We navigate that. I can understand if you say you don't have time. We can navigate that because that's a pinpoint based on, that's a pattern. You've built a pattern around not having time. So your habits are to distract you from not having enough time. Your habits are based around not knowing and listening to you. So since you're not used to no one listening to you, you might have this habit of you speak very, very loudly. You speak very, very high pitch. You go to the high tone to make sure people are listening to you and gravitating towards your voice. But understand this. Where is that voice? Where is that coming from? This is when we break down in the aspect, we understand our energy. If you're speaking from we speak from the throat chakra. What if your throat chakra is overbalanced? Do you know what an overbalanced throat chakra sounds like? An overbalanced throat chakra sounds like. Do you know what an underutilized throat chakra sounds like? An overbalanced throat chakra, it sounds very, very aggressive. It's very aggressive. It's an aggressive tone. It's either aggressive or passive aggressive in the tone. It's very based. Since it's in a fear-based state, usually when you're having that conversation, the way that you speak is to everything that you say sounds loaded. So you ask a question, but your question, because it's overbalanced and it's aggressive inside of that state, you're having that conversation. When you're having it, usually it's going to a tone to see how that person reacts to it. Since your tone is reactionary, you want someone to have a reactionary tone back to it. So if they don't say something, think about it. How many times you had a conversation and they didn't say something fast enough? How many times have you had a conversation and the answer that they gave you wasn't an answer that you could react to? It was an answer you had to sit with. You feel what I'm saying? There's these levels inside of that space. This explains how you communicate to others. Why you only talk to certain people. Why you only bring up certain things around certain people. Why you won't have that conversation. What that conversation means. How long it takes to actually process that conversation. Why? Because the emotional regulation, the emotional identification, regulation, your EQ, your emotional intelligence, the EQ, the equalizer, how you regulate it, is based on that 20 minutes. So you got to ask yourself a question. That's why I always ask this question to people. How many of your conversations stopped abruptly because you weren't able to process? Simple example. Were you really upset and your day was bad, or the initial time when you were upset, you had two choices. From the moment that you got upset, the moment that spike, that emotional spike, when that 90 seconds revved up, that infatuation spiked up, inspiration, things of that nature spiked up, you had a choice. Were you going to step back for 20 minutes? I need 20 minutes. I need 20 minutes. I need 20, 30 minutes to myself to regulate myself. I don't want to say anything. And then usually when you say, I don't want to say nothing, I don't want to regret. It's not that you're going to, in most cases, this is what I've learned. It's not that you're going to regret what you were going to say. It is the tone that is behind it. It is not what you were going to say. It's the tone that was behind it. A lot of times when we think about when you apologize to somebody, if we don't understand the process or the apologies to set if we don't understand that the apology is to set the tone of the decree, for an example. If I don't understand that my apologies to set the tone of the decree, then I don't know how to go into that space and have that conversation. And then later on, at the end of that conversation, let's say I come back after that 20 minutes, 30, took a day. It took the moment. We came back together. We had that conversation. Can I say I apologize for my tone? I apologize for my tone. And if it came off really harsh, if it come off off-putting, I could see visually that it triggered you. I apologize for my tone. And I stand, this is the important part. Don't say but, because but cuts out everything. And I'm stating this apology to apologize for my tone, but what I said in that moment, I'm standing on. I'm standing on what I said in that moment. Yes, I can apologize for the tone, but I'm not going to take back what I said. If you want to have this discussion, we're going to have this discussion, and the first thing that you want to talk, I apologize for my tone. I apologize for the initial triggering. This is so you don't have, this is the process. So you're not always inside of a space to where when we talk about confirming somebody's feelings, your feelings are valid. But what is the emotion behind the feeling? See, the emotion behind that feeling is what triggers that tone. The emotions behind that feeling, the energy behind that feeling, the energetic behind that feeling are what set the tone. So if you trigger somebody and now they feel guilty, they feel like they felt guilty for even asking, they felt guilty for even saying anything to you, so to speak, inside of that space, guess what? They felt guilty. Their feeling is valid. All you can control is your reaction and accountability for your reaction and your response and how you delivered it. So now when you're sitting there in that processing of that information, were you saying it from a space of guilt? Were you saying it from a space of shame? Were you saying it from a space of insecurity? Were you saying it from a space of doubt? You feel what I'm saying? Were you saying it? Where was that tone coming from energetically to deliver that message? You feel what I'm saying? Listening to how somebody, the listening aspect and the comprehension aspect, we're comprehending, because everybody will always say communication is key. Communication is important for me. It doesn't matter what I say to you, how you say it to somebody, if their level of comprehension is not matching, their level of comprehension is not in alignment with their level of awareness. That's really what it is that fucks up a lot of the things. It's that level of awareness. It's your level of awareness to a situation. If you're always, let's use for an example, we'll talk about inner child. If you came from an environment where there was always tension, and it's important to understand how the tension was broken. Remember, tension is natural. Friction is natural. Conflict is natural. These are natural aspects. Vulnerability is natural. You feel what I'm saying? The emotions are natural. The feelings are natural. The behaviors are natural. The patterns, the habits are natural. That's why it's so easy for you to fall in them and stay within them. What we have to understand is what attributes of myself, of my situations, of my circumstances, whether it's my unresolved or my resolved, what are those things that I'm attaching to this? Because here's the game. If I've always, like, for example, my entire first half of my playing time down here in this realm, in the initial realm, was always based on being reactionary. A lot of my shit was reactionary. A lot of my shit was based on making the spaces. A lot of my aspects was making the spaces in which I was interacting with to make them okay for everybody else. Making sure that everybody else, that was surface level. But it was really, I was making all of the spaces in attunement with my unresolved aspects of being abandoned. My unresolved of not being able to have a conversation, not having a conversation or speaking or even speak, not even much of speaking out, but speaking up and understanding the tone I use when I speak up. A lot of my spaces, so a lot of the spaces that I populated earlier on in my life, and I've used these examples before, I developed an environment, the environment that populated for me that matched my work, my system of work ethic. My standard operating procedures of work ethic, my relationships, friendships, jobs was like I was talking about this. It was in the aspect of restaurants. I was working in restaurants because if you are familiar with hospitality, restaurants and that nature, back of house, front of house, you understand that world is, as I have always seen it, that world is very high school. The world of restaurants for me was very high school. It was very high school based. It was very high school love affair, high school affairs, high school conflicts, popularity contests, things of that nature. So inside of that space, remember, I'm gonna give you the precursor. Since my precursor, the pre-post cursor that led me into working in restaurants and working in hospitality and working in that environment, college, school, and things of that nature, all of those fit those habits. So everything fit within that space. It wasn't until I started stepping out of this space and being pushed out of that space that I didn't realize how distracted I was. I didn't realize how distracted I was. I didn't realize that my communication style of being on, like, use an example. The only time that I had a voice was to be loud, was to be online. Was only being online. Like you in line on the kitchen, a kitchen's super loud. Saying I can look at in my current, cause we're present, I can look at the things that I say, how I say things. These are my comprehensions. Whenever I'm in the house and I'm walking around, I'm saying, I'll send a message. 9 out of 10, I'm sending heard. I'll say behind. I'll say hot. I'll say all of these terms that are in comprehending my movements. This is the understanding aspect when you manifest the things into your space. That's how I was manifesting you manifest through the comprehension of your momentum. You do not manifest through the communication. You manifest through the comprehension, your level of comprehension. So if my level of comprehension is very limited, but I'm and this is another key, the more my comprehension or my awareness of how I comprehend things, how I take things in, how I process things, if that is lagging, and we talk about this in sessions all the time. If I'm lagging in that area, that means by the time I process Monday, it's Friday. By the time I process today, it's Friday. You feel what I'm saying? There's nothing wrong with my process taking 5 days. First thing I had to understand. It's me sitting in that space and how active in my communication about me comprehending my processing. This goes into the state of, if I need to have a conversation or a conversation must be had or is being brought to my attention, how do I listen? How am I processing that conversation? Is it in alignment and an attunement to my purpose? This is where we go all the way back to what I said when we talked about in the beginning, the aspects of my decompression. I had to understand the aspects of my decompression process. If my decompression, and we use the example, my decompressing is about 3 to 4 hours. About 3 to 4 hours. My self-reflection, getting my day started, and that includes the things including assessing the new things that come into my space, about 4 to 5 hours. Now I'm in a sense of balance this is when we talk about being at peace. It doesn't matter what happens before. It doesn't so much matter what happens before, for example, today being me doing a live before 11:30. As long as I have everything set up that I need to have set up, and I have everything in place before 11:30, that doesn't mean this is where we get triggered a lot. You'll be like, oh shit, I'm ahead of schedule. I got this done, and this done, and this done earlier on. So I'm ahead of schedule. What happens? Think about it like this. I'll use this analogy, use this example. You just moved to your new job. You just moved closer to your new job, to where you were driving 30 minutes to get to your job. Your job's now 5 minutes away. So the communication is how you're going to get to work. The timeline of you getting to work is now 5 minutes. So now the comprehension, the process, is how am I going to ensure what can I put inside of this space with this new 30 minutes? This, when we think about the aspect of when you're budgeting, when we budget our emotions, our energy, and you understand your capacity. If I understand my capacity for self-reflection, for me, first thing in the AM is at 4 to 6 hours. That means anything that goes into that space must be at its highest peak. It doesn't matter. Remember, their system and your system is based on how the infrastructures align. That conversation that I have in that 4 to 6, in between this period of time, is it beneficial to that space? This is hard a lot of times because if you're not, most of the times we think about the high school love affair aspect. Most of us that came up and we're thinking about, let's say you came up between the real years of the 2000s to about 2010, about 2004, 5, 6, up to about 10. One of the examples that we had anytime minutes. Before that process, it was, you had to send a letter. You had to see that motherfucker at school. You had to wait till school year was up. Y'all lived in y'all weren't traveling like that. But then we got the anytime minutes. Anytime minutes is free it was free after 9. And on the weekends, it was free after 7 all the way up till Monday at 6 a.m. on Sunday. So now you took that goal to have that conversation, but your old system was in place. Your old system was, remember, think about what was a part of your old system. I remember what was part of my old system. I grew up in that era, in that point in time, to where you weren't supposed to have a phone call after 9 o'clock. You weren't talking on the phone after 9. You was getting ready. You just got out of the bath. You getting ready to lay down and go to sleep, so to speak, after 9. So now you're introduced this new objective. I'm introduced this new objective. The new objective being free after 9. So now any conversation, any actions or conversation that I'm about to have is going to be based on the infatuation of the guilt or the shame or the doubt, the guilt, the shame that I'm going to feel if I get caught. Because think about it. You get caught on your phone after 9 o'clock, up after 9. I remember getting caught. I remember never really getting caught. I just had my phone. I wasn't talking to people after 9 o'clock. But I remember everything around me integrated with that system. Everything around me and my brother shared a room when we were little. So my brother is in the room. I'm up after 9. I'm honoring. All right, cool. I'm not going to call. It's going to be text message after 9. I'm going to put my phone on vibrate. Y'all remember the original phones? Vibration loud as hell. So I put the phone under my pillow. So now I'm doing that the next couple of weeks. Now my brother is up because I'm up. He's following suit in the attunement. Now he's doing things inside that same space that are equivalent to what I'm doing energetically. We're both doing it based on not getting caught, so to speak. We're both doing it based on not getting caught. We're both doing it based on not being seen, not being caught. So now he gets caught. He gets caught. My phone's under my pillow. I'm trying to pretend I'm asleep. Now we both get in trouble. Now, the only thing that I can control inside of this environment, when we don't really understand these types of things, is me taking accountability for me being in trouble. Me taking accountability for my brother snitching on me, he's on his phone, and taking that accountability. You feel what I'm saying? In that space. This is an example of an unresolved aspect from our childhood. It doesn't have to, because I always tell people about the aspects of trauma. When we think about traumatic events, trauma is anything that destabilizes the ability to regulate the energy behind said behavior. Trauma is anything that immobilizes the ability to regulate the emotions and process the emotions behind said behavior. This is where a lot of those things come into play. So now that goes unresolved. So now that becomes your new system of operations. That becomes your new standard operating procedure, whether you understood it or not. When we think about the aspects, I've talked about the aspects of how I used to define money. I defined money from a space of scarcity. I had to understand. It was easy to be like, yeah, I define it from a space from lack, from scarcity, from victimhood. But then you're going to go look for the answer. Yes, because they won't give black people loans and this, and this. No. Every time they say you need to get a loan, you got to have some money. If I had the money, then I wouldn't have to ask for the money. You're acting from a scarcity mindset. You're acting from scarcity. Because understand it is not about having the money, it's having the energetics built, it's having the system that is in place to show how you're going to demonstrate the infrastructure that you're building based on getting that new energy, based on tapping into that energy, that level of awareness. Because you go have that conversation with the bank, with the loan officer, with the credit, whatever it may be, what happens? You start feeling all down. Your posture gets weaker. You spent 3 hours in the mirror before you left the house, working on the aesthetic, the grooming, not the self-care, the grooming. I'm going to give you the example. You just spent it's similar to we think about with school. You spent the entire weekend in a state of distraction. You went to the club, you went to the 3 cookouts, you went to the birthday party. Somebody said they wanted to do this. You ate like this. Where did that come from? Remember, none of this is in a current space. It's a postcursor to the precursor where it originally came from. If my habit, use the example of the habits, how you form that habit, how you form that behavior, how you form that pattern behind that behavior. So now where I was at the house all day, all weekend, I'm studying. I didn't went to the store. I didn't went and got a hair. I didn't went and did everything I needed to get. I started last Monday, as an example, to make sure I had everything in alignment for this Monday in that space. So everything that I did, this is when I talk about difference between motion and momentum, everything that I did created a certain level of momentum in my life. My system is now based on momentum and not based on motion. So now the conversations that I have, my comprehension, my style of communication is based on building momentum. So now everything that's within my space is going to highlight not where I have momentum, but where there is a motion in place that I need to assess. You feel what I'm saying? That's the assessment. That's the assessment. That's that conversation to where you got home early one day. You got home early And now that you're home early, you don't know what to do at this time because you're used to motions and not momentum. I had to understand how much I've talked about it before, how lazy I was, because it wasn't lazy in the aspect of derogatory or detriment or this derogatory or guilt sense. I was lazy in the sense of I didn't know how to maintain momentum. I only knew how to maintain motion. So everything inside of all of my patterns and habits were based on motion. So a lot of the things we use the example, when I was working that good old 9 to 5, I had a lot of motion when I was working the 9 to 5. When I was in my earlier years of the aspects of how I got through college and in the less projected sense of something being positive was unsavory acts. I had a lot of motion, but I didn't have momentum. The reason I had a lot of motion is I knew it when I had to understand that it was motion is because when I stopped, everything else stopped. Everything else halted. Everything else came up. Oh my God. I can't believe that I've been doing this. I've been on autopilot. When you're stuck in a lot of motions, you get stuck on autopilot. So anything that comes into that space on the choice of, wait, I got to gain momentum. That means, wait, if I'm not used to directing my own time, my job directed my time. My boss, my manager did the schedule. Even up to when I give more game. Even when I became a manager, a supervisor, and I was in charge of schedules. You feel me? My schedule was because I wasn't understanding from where I was at based on momentum. I was looking based on motion. I had the unconscious, even when with the unconscious habit, I would only schedule certain people to work on certain shifts with me. I would only schedule certain employees to work with me. I would always make shit work for me. This is the aspect when you stuck in motion. I was making things work for me based on the skill set that I acquired for that space. So of course I can say, yeah, my shifts never go that bad. But to step out of my comfort zone, I had to understand why my shifts were not connecting to create momentum for other people's shifts. And it wasn't about, once again, we talk about the system. It wasn't about my system that I put in place. It was the infrastructure that was in alignment with my system. This is where comprehension came in. Can you explain? I don't know how many times I sat in manager meetings and my manager was like, so how do you do it? How do you ensure that your shifts run at that high level that we're looking for? I never could really explain it. And when I did explain it, it was nothing based on who I was. It was very tangible things. It was very tangible. And the only reason it stayed tangible because I wasn't comfortable in sharing, or I wasn't sitting in that space of vulnerability with myself to be able to explain and simplify why it is that I do certain things for fear of being questioned, for fear of being judged, for fear of being rejected, for fear of we have the whole conversation and I get the pat on the back and the praise, and then I go into the kitchen. I walk into the kitchen and I hear them talking. They can be whether or not they're saying some shit about me, about what I just said. I'm hearing it through that guilt. You feel what I'm saying? I'm hearing it through that guilt. I'm hearing it through that stream. So it doesn't matter what objective that I have. My system was based on being rejected. So of course, every one of my goals fed being rejected. So of course, it seemed good and easy in the aspects of motion. But when we're talking about momentum, how does that flow out into my day? How does that flow out into the other areas of my life when I use the same energy? Because of the fear of me being rejected that I used as the motion to get through a shift at my job, guess what I would do as soon as I got paid. Guess what you do as soon as you get paid? Oh my God, I just worked 40, 50 hours. I deserve to go get this food from over here. I deserve to go smoke here. I deserve to go out and chill and relax. I deserve that. Okay. No saying you don't deserve it, but if you know one of my favorite mantras is, you're deserving, but you're not entitled. The faith without works is dead. You feel what I'm saying? What work did you put? What work? Because the work is always there. What work did you put into what you're deserving? What work? Meaning, what structure? What objectives? What goals? Because here's the thing. The goal is natural. The objective is natural. It's always there. It's always there. If your goal is to go out and have a good time, that's a goal. What work have you put into that goal? When we think about grabbing that momentum, I'm in a space to where I love being that I can wake up in every system that's in place, whether I'm learning it, even whether I fully learned it and now I'm demonstrating it, or to the other end of that aspect of that spectrum, I can explain and be like, hey, I'm still processing this. I'm still making sure this is right. I can have, remember, the yeses and the nos. I can have that conversation, and it's balanced on both. It's balanced. It's balanced. I'm not sitting there from an angle or from a space of, all right, cool, let me try to figure this out and put this into no. I have to look at where I'm at, my process, where I'm at, and what is necessary for me inside of that space. If somebody says, hey, we're going out for drinks, what time? We make the joke of the time after being over 30. 10 o'clock? So you're not talking about going to the first place until 10 o'clock. And then you're going to go from there to another place. So y'all not getting home and then that's an hour drive to get there or wherever it may be. So by the time you get home, it's 4 or 5 o'clock in the AM. That means when by the time you're going to bed, I'm in my last line. I'm in my last point of me turning over to wake up. My body starts to wake up and come back online is now going to be fucked with. You feel what I'm saying? This is what we think about the honesty and actually listening. How many times have you had that conversation to where you say, I'm not going to be able to do it. You say you can't instead of saying can't, say I'm not going to be able to do it and then give you a reason. Because saying you can't do it is the same as saying but. I'm going to show you this is the things that we learn in aspects of in class, in sessions, is understanding how can't translates to your subconscious. Every time you usually say can't, that's the same as you saying but. I can't do this because of. I will not be able to do this because versus I can't do this. It allows the subconscious mind to take that information in. It allows the subconscious mind to now open up the conscious, unlock the doors of the conscious, open up the subconscious mind so you can start having that actual conversation and processing those feelings. Because yes, I tell people all the time, it's okay to feel bad that you can't go out. It's okay to feel bad that you're not going to be able to go out that night. It's okay to feel bad that you're not going to be able to do this for certain people. It's okay. It's okay to have the feeling. But understanding and processing that emotion is more important to your system, your standard operating practices, your system of operation than anything. Because if you don't process it, that's what you're going to use to go into that space. So guess where your level of awareness is going to be at? It's going to be stuck on that guilt. It's going to be stuck on that guilt. So now you're at this event and this is where it usually happens. The things that you usually wouldn't do, the things that you usually would put off, the things that you would usually speak, the things that you now would speak up strongly against, like, I'm only going to have one drink. I'm only going to have one shot. I'm only going to be here for a few minutes. I'm going to show my face. I'm going to give a toast. Then because I have to do work and I have to go to work. I have to do this. All of that becomes muted. Now, the thing about things becoming muted, just because it's muted doesn't mean it's still there. Remember, when you take the mute off, the volume goes back up to its regular. When you allow yourself to be muted in that space, you also remember, let's say in that space, the volume was at 35. The volume inside the club, the bar, wherever that event may be, it may have been a higher energy, so to speak. It might be a higher frequency on that energy of guilt, because, there's frequencies to that shit. So you didn't feel like yelling. You didn't want to yell. You didn't want to be loud. So you muted yourself the entire time. You're going to carry that energetic communication outside of that space to where it worked, where it fed, where it was facilitated to feed. You're going to shift that energy into a space to where it's calm. You're going to shift that stuff into a space of when you're sitting there at 4:00 a.m. in your car and there's no gas station open. Things that you're going to shift it into that space. So now this is what we think about. Your feeling is valid based on what you acknowledge the space and where it was at. That's where the acknowledgement comes in. But if you're not used to acknowledging that my feeling spiked here, that 90-second pulse happened here, you're not even, in that sense, you're not going to be able to even understand that you had 6 moments where a minute and 30 seconds went by where you felt something and were triggered, and you didn't take a chance to process it. You replaced that 90 seconds of being angry with to go get that shot, to go get that drink. You took that 90 seconds of being angry, being in doubt, being ashamed, whatever it may have been. You took that and you took it into that one night stand. You took it into the bedroom. You took it to wherever you took it. And now you're going to find yourself trying to make that space. They're not the same space. You're going to try to make that objective fit this system, and that system wasn't designed for that. So now you're going to redefine this system, and that's this when we talk about the system. Now you're going to redefine this system, and now since you're trying to redefine this system, you're taking infrastructure of lack and the infrastructure of lack, guilt, shame, this lower level frequency of emotion, and trying to apply it to a new objective. It's not going to work. It's not going to manifest what you wanted to manifest. It's only going to manifest based on from the level where it's at. This, when you think about it, you can avoid, let's say you avoid that phone call think about it, you avoid the phone call all day. You avoid the conversation all day. You avoid. But 9 times out of 10, every time that you acknowledge it or you give yourself a false sense of acknowledgement to it, what happens? Something pops up in your environment that matches the objective that you need to assess. Something pops up. Something pops up to remind you. Always something there something pops up to remind you. Something pops up to remind you that the system of me needing this money for this means that in these points in time, as an example, I should have been working on this prior or acknowledging, because in that whole period of time, you had time to acknowledge what you needed to do. What you had time to speak up, but if you're not used to having those conversations with yourself, if that's not a part of your self-care routine, that's not a part of your self-care and your self-love routine, then every time you try to groom a new infrastructure, it's not going to work. It's going to be met with resistance. This is where we get confused a lot of times in that sense, because based on that we think the path of less resistance, not understanding that once again, resistance and conflict is natural, you're confusing conflict for resistance. You're confusing conflict for resistance. Conflict is anytime you go into a space, you have a new idea, some shit gotta be stirred up from the bottom. That's the conflict. That's the natural motion of conflict. Resistance is where you did not acknowledge the conflict, and now you're trying to pour what is inside of that space, pour that energy into a new space, but it's based on settlement, so it's diluted. See, what you're getting stuck on the resistance is what you diluted. This is the emotion from the feeling, i.e. feeling/behavior. Most of your behaviors coming from a space of fear, coming from a space of doubt, coming from that lower space is diluted. This is why when you go into the conversation, you have conversations with people, you're hoping not to be seen. This is where psychologically we try to minimize situations. We try to say, well, this happened, so this had to happen. So you get stuck in these lines. This is where a lot of those processes come into place. This is where a lot, as the title to this live, of that memorializing. This is where we get stuck in that state of consistently trying to memorialize our mortality. You try to memorialize your mentality in that space. The last time that it worked. Well, it worked back then. I don't know why it's not working now. Energy's different. Well, I've had this conversation a million times and everybody else seems to agree. So why don't you agree? Why were they agreeing with him? When you were giving them the level of, did you give them the full scale of the comprehension? Or are you accustomed to having certain conversations in certain spaces? And then since you're not used to developing the communication style, learning style, observing, listening, whether you're indirect and direct, when you have a conversation with somebody else and they're more affluent, they can articulate at a higher capacity. Their EQ is higher. Their emotional intelligence is higher. Now you're inside of that space trying to have that. You're trying to have that same conversation that you've been having for years that worked in that old space. It ain't going to work over there. The energy is different. This person is able to eloquently express, this is why these are some possible reasons why this is like this. I acknowledge this person, then put on top of that with the EQ, the person is able to acknowledge you, and you're not used to being acknowledged. You think being acknowledged is being validated. Being acknowledged is like, I hear you. I see you. I'm trying to understand you. I'm going to ask questions based on understanding. I'm trying to comprehend. Acknowledgement for somebody else's comprehension. Learning how they comprehend you. You can have a whole conversation with somebody and they might not say 3 words. The entire conversation. And since you're not used to somebody jumping in, since you're not used to somebody not jumping in, you're not used to somebody actually listening, you automatically, a part of you starts to look at that person, that space, and look at them and start to try to rationalize what they're doing. Oh, you're not listening to me. You're not hearing me. You're not listening. Did you explain it to them? Did you give them the open space of, okay, I know we just had this conversation, and I noticed in the last conversation, because this is where the intelligence comes in. I noticed in the last conversation, I started feeling, because it's okay to acknowledge what you started feeling. This is one of the things we go through in the session. I felt this way. This is where we push past saying, I felt some type of way, and you actually say what you felt. You actually say what you felt. And the first time you say what you feel in a lot of situations, it's going to feel like you're being dismissed because you're only used to saying what you feel through being dismissed. This is how we got to understand these terms in your communication style. How you communicate. Why you communicate certain things. Why you say certain things in certain spaces. These are very important. Because until you're able to understand these things, you don't understand that the manifestation comes through comprehension. The greater your manifestation, the greater your level of comprehension must be. Because comprehension Comprehension equates to momentum. If I'm always saying what I'm going to do, but at no point in time in saying what I'm going to do, I am not actively assessing and acknowledging these are the things that I must comprehend first. It's fear that's stopping me from doing this. It's doubt that's stopping me from doing this. It's my first time, and I still have a fear of doing things for the first time, because every time I do something for the first time, I have not sat with the fact that I'm not used to. I made my space, my patterns and my behaviors are accustomed to one shot and done. When I do it, it's right. So my confidence level, I'm confusing my confidence level with my competency. This is another layer to the communication process. A lot of times, remember, for the first few weeks in the lives that we were doing, I said I was not confident. I had a high sense of competency for things, but I didn't have no confidence. So I was very dependent on my competency to get me through a situation. My competency kept me hidden. My competency kept me right there in the pocket so no one can see me. But at the end, I can get a little bit, when I get the praise, since I don't have the confidence, I don't understand how to take in praise. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to overcompensate the next time. These are the things that as we're building out this new system, so when we're working this session, we're doing the work, these are the parts of those systems that as we're building in that new space, why it's so important. You're not doing any of these things to remain within the same paradigm of space. The same paradoxes, the same skill sets, same communication, same standard operating agreements. Everything you're doing is to acknowledge what is present in this space. This when we talk about dealing with your shadow works with you when you integrate with it. But if you're only used to using your shadow based on dumping and guilt into it, then every time that that shadow comes up and you feeling guilty, let's say you feel guilty, but you want to push through, it can be something. This is when we talk about the aspects of how we use our trauma or the unresolved. It can be you're using guilt to push through at the gym. So as you're using that comprehension in the gym of getting your workouts through guilt, now you feel like when you get off, you need more guilt. So where do you go? Where do you go? You don't go to, give an example. We think about the spending habits, your spending habits and how you do things inside of that space. In order for you to feel guilty and not to dissociate from your guilt, where will you go? You know that for yourself of where you're at in that current space, Walmart is the best place for you. Food Line is the best place for you. These are the best places for you at that point in time because of what you're cycling through. You're allowing yourself to cycle. You must go into these older spaces, like the Food Line, the grocery store, the Walmart, the Kroger, the whatever the store may be. You feel what I'm saying? And you must sit within that space and be like, damn, they don't have what I need. Because you're going to go from, they have what you wanted, but they don't have what you need. That's when you make that observation. Okay, cool. They don't have what I need. And usually they used to have what I wanted because it matched for me to go there after I got off later at work. It matched that. But now that I need something greater in my space to create the visual that I'm trying to create and manifest, now I'm going to go to the Sprouts, Whole Foods. I'm going to go to one of these stores. So now when I go into this store, since I'm going based on my needs of what I need presently in my new system that I'm creating, yes, I'm going to feel guilty. Yes, I'm going to feel the audacity for them to have a bag of apples for $10. Yes, I'm going to feel those things. But these triggers allow me to assess other things in my system. These allow me to assess other things in my system. It isn't, damn, now I get to see my habits. Now I'm observing my habits. My spending habits equated to the pattern of me going to a certain place and getting certain things. They saw me there. They knew me there, things of that nature. They fit a certain behavior. Because think about it. You didn't been to a place where you damn near want to curse everybody out inside that space, but you still go. You still go. You go right into the space. You know they ain't gonna. You know you go into Walmart and there's no motherfucking. You know there's gonna be self checkout and the line's gonna be there. Gonna be 2 cashiers. You knew that, but it fed your inability to regulate being rejected. See how we connect those things? So now you're like, damn, nigga, that's how I was using rejection to go to Walmart. Yes, that's the emotion you were feeding. I was using rejection to eat fast food. Yes, that was the food. Remember, you eat with your emotions. So that's what you were using inside of that space. So since I'm using these things inside of that space, they have to have a population. There always has to be a reason for me to go there. There always has to be a reason for me not to do this. There always has to be a reason for me to hide for 3 days. There always has to be a reason. Always has to be a reason. Because that's how I created my spaces. That's how I formulated and created these spaces for myself to exist. It's that process that when we start understanding these processes, that we're able to create new systems. I don't care what you do. I don't care what you do. Do whatever thou wilt. But until you assess your system, any goal, any objective, any process, any progress is going to be deemed with expectations. The higher your expectations usually means the lower your system. This is one thing that I've learned. The higher my expectations inside of a situation, that means my lower my comprehension of my systems. Do I understand this system and why this system was put in place? Do I understand that the reason that these people are populating inside of around this system is because they're all still trying to do certain things? Do I understand that that's the reason I never seem to be able to have any momentum? It's always a sense of motion. Therefore, my motions are always based on distracting myself. My motions are always, something always seems to drop in exactly when I need it, when I feel like not doing something. I always get it. But then I can't acknowledge that when I do want to do something, something always happens to where I can't do it. They're on the same wavelength. They're on the same vibratory rate. That's why it keeps happening. That's why anything that's outside of that is going to force you into a state of response. It's going to force you into a state of response. It's going to naturally challenge you. This is when we look at, and these are one of the things we'll be getting into the class, August 5th, first day of class. It is a virtual 5-week class. Once again, for clients, for active clients, it is now, the prices went up to 60. So if you got in at 50, you got in at 50. For clients now, it is 60. And for non-clients, it is 120. It is 120 for non-clients. Along with the aspects of understanding how I create systems. So now when I create systems, my systems are not based on what I need then. It's based on what I'm building up to. All of my systems that I'm now creating and I'm fully aware of is in the system of, I know that my system is, I use an example. I was having this conversation earlier. My systems, I want to be dedicated to a net 90 account. If you're familiar with business structures, a net 90 account, net 30 account, net 60 account is invoices receivable within the next 90 days. To simplify that example, anything that I'm doing right now at this very moment is not for the next 90 days. Anything that I'm doing right now at this very moment is set for the next 90 days. Takes a lot of pressure off doing it. Think about that. My systems that I'm now creating, the objectives that I'm now creating within those systems are set to the tone to where I know they will not go into full effect until 90 days. That does not stop me from that aids me in, if something happens early on, let's say within day 40 of the 90 days, some shit happens. Something goes viral, something pops up, something happens. I understand that that's the first wave. Instead of me banking and using that wave as motion till I've made it, I'm going to learn from what just happened. I'm going to learn why this came up and why it came up in that space. I'm going to be able to assess that this shit right here took 30 days. What seemed to what it took 30 days instantaneous was only based on because of something that I set in tone 90 days ago. That's the reason that the thought of doing 90 days even came up the first time. This is a lot of times when I tell people, when you have a new idea, when you have a new objective, when you get something new, there's a reason that it popped up. But if you're not accustomed to the assessment of your timelines, how long it takes you to manifest the comprehensive manifestation process, then you're not going to be able to understand that, okay, cool. If you notice that happened in 30 days, but how many months, what were you saying prior to that? What was the conversation you were having for that? What was the conversation that you were having with yourself around others that led with that? What led that? Actually, what led that? If you had 16 negative ass conversations and said, I'm going to show you, 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 watch this. Observe how you react or respond to it happening. You're going to spend another, because compound interest, you spent, let's say you had 16 conversations and you had 16 mass conversations and you're going to prove it to people, including to yourself. That means you're going to have 32 more conversations and 32 more moments, because it's going to double up, Harlem logic. You're going to double up on trying to prove yourself with that motion. You're going to create 32 more moments. Just to simplify, 32 more moments. So now if those 32, this is why usually when some shit, after about that moment when it starts wearing thin, after that 16 conversation that you had, you ain't got nothing built on top of that. You spend the next 16 rebuilding doubt, reinforcing the doubt, reinforcing the insecurity, reinforcing the guilt. You spend the next 16 days reinforcing it. Think about it when you go to the gym and you work. Think about it when you go to the gym and you work out. You lost 6 pounds and you put on a certain pair of pants. But now this is where it becomes, oh, I can have a cheat day. As long as I know what I need to do, just go work out. You didn't understand that the workout you did last week had nothing to do with that week. It was the first initial workout that you had, the first initial workout that you committed to that led to the results of this week, of that 6 month. You know what I'm saying? These are the aspects when we're looking at your standard operating procedures, when you're looking at how you communicate, when you're looking at even with your non-negotiables. Now we're in the section where we're going to talk about our non-negotiables. Think about your non-negotiables. My non-negotiables have changed. I used to have so many non-negotiables in place, and they came with a certain level of expectation. They were not going to challenge my system. You need those things to be challenged to challenge your system. That's necessary to challenge your system. Because if you never challenge your system, how do you expand past your system? If you never expand past the belief, how do you actually step into the aspects of knowing? Because there's a belief system and then there's a knowing system. In the knowing system, in the system of knowing, I realize that I don't know anything. There's always more to learn. There's always more to apply. There's always more to process. There's always more space for me to learn, apply, process, observe, listen, learn, detach, learn where I dissociate, to go through the process. But if I'm stuck in a system of beliefs, I'm looking for things that categorize my belief. So it doesn't matter what things that come in new, I'm going to kick out 98% of it for the 1% that fits my belief. I'm going to knock off, I'm a cancel a conversation that is now we break down the example of having a consultation. Consultations, once again, they're on special, running the special up until Thursday. That means the price is available till Thursday. Price is available till Wednesday, Thursday. That means right now till Thursday, it is $90 to book the virtual consultation, which is a maximum of 3 hours. Here's the thing. You don't have to use the whole 3 hours within that first session. We can split that session up. Hour 40, that means, use an example. That means, let's say for an example, you made a booking and your booking was for Tuesday. I think I got an availability on Tuesday for 4 o'clock. That means, let's say you only have 30 minutes. Say you only have 30 minutes. 45 minutes. That means from 4 o'clock to 4:45, we can have that initial session. Tomorrow, the next Wednesday, the same thing Wednesday, okay, cool, we can have another conversation, 30 minutes. Let's say Thursday for me, I got things I'm motioning and moving, so I might not be available Thursday, but Friday we can have that next session. Saturday we can have that next session. We can build out your first, that's what? 30, that's an hour, that's 2 hours. 2 hours. Right there, 2 hours. And you can have 5 different sessions over those hours. Now you're becoming accustomed to the space. Because the way that I've created my systems is because regardless of whether you have the hour, I use myself as an example. When we talk about systems and infrastructure, my system is set up that my infrastructure allows you the space to expand out what needs to be expanded so we can break it down. Because my infrastructure is based on simplifying, breaking down, you sitting with it, you going through the process. None of my infrastructure is instantaneous, intentionally. None of my system is instantaneously meant to make you feel good. I have whole sessions where you can go from being super, super, super happy and deflective to at the end of the session, you sitting there like, shit, this motherfucker then broke my ass apart. Feel what I'm saying? Inside of that space. These are the things that we look at and we adjust and we learn. Because I've created my system for anything that taps into my infrastructure. I know that my infrastructure, it's my infrastructure, i.e. my boundaries that's triggering people. I should not feel, if I do feel guilt for my system, when I assess my system based on feeling guilt, feeling insecure, or this is when we get into people trying to make me feel insecure about what I do and how I live my life, and that's wrong. No, it's not. They have every single right to challenge and be stringent and debilitating and dissociative with your system. Why? Because that's showing you where your system is at. Where you're being triggered at is showing you the flaws in your system. This is when we think about the flaws. Your non-negotiables. You may have had a whole non-negotiable in your system for the aspect of 90. Let's use the simple rule we're going to talk about in class. You could have said, okay, cool. It takes 90. It's going to be 60 to 90 days before you let somebody have sex with you. Okay. What are you doing inside of that space? What are you looking for? Are you looking at the infrastructure? Are you basing your non-negotiables based on the infrastructure? Or are you basing your non-negotiable based on gestures? There's a difference. Are you basing your infrastructure based on your non-negotiables based on their infrastructures or on the gestures? You know the difference. When it's gestures, it's usually externally based. Most of the time it's externally based. It's an externalized feature, even if it includes you. hey, I'm able to do this, 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 and this, and I'm doing this, this, and this. Why can't you do it? This is my non-negotiable for what I'm not going to settle for. But if you look at your system, how balanced is your system? Yeah, you're able to wake up early as fuck and work long hours and go to sleep late and barely eat and things of that nature. But if you're looking based on gestures, you're looking for somebody who does that same exact. You're going to be looking for somebody who does the equivalent. They don't eat. When they do eat, they eat. What you're going to be looking for in result of gestures, they know how to sit down. They know how to sit down and make the gesture of like, you need to sit down, I'm going to feed you. Because your system actually, based on the gesture of you not eating, is based on you not setting out ample time for you to eat. You don't know how to meal prep. You don't know how to set a system in place to actually wake up at a certain time because your body is too exhausted. So that's gesture. Oh my God, they took me out to eat. Or we go, they feed this, they feed this, they feed this in me, they feed this. All right, cool. You didn't look at that person's infrastructure. Because looking at that person's infrastructure, you're understanding you're understanding that person's day to day. You're understanding that person's day to day. You're understanding the flow of that person's day to day. If they wake up, if they're waking up early, and let's say, for an example, you have a conversation with them on the phone, a message, whatever it is, in person, whatever, and you see them putting together on Sunday, you have a conversation with them. This is when you're learning the infrastructure as an example. You're noticing that they meal prep every Sunday. Even if their meal prep includes, this is the list of things that I need to get from the grocery store they went on Saturday. But your Saturday gestures, your cheat day matches them splurging money at that restaurant. That's your cheat day. So you get to splurge. So by the time you get to Monday, you're still remember, your body only digests food or anything that you digest when you're in rest, when you're in a resting state. If you're exhausting your body has to, most of the time, when we think about this aspect in systems, the reason you always feel tired no matter how much sleep you get is because you're bringing your body from exhaustion to resting. I want you to understand that. You're bringing your system, most of the times, for most of the things that we're doing, when we think about the trauma, we think about infatuation, we think about relationships, because all of this shit connects. You're bringing yourself from a state of exhaustion to a state of resting. And if we understand anything in the aspect of the sacral system, we talked about this in Soccer Shadow last year. I'll get into it in the class. If I understand that my resting state is my programming state, my sleeping state, if my sleep state is only based on exhaustion, I'm tethered to being exhausted. That means I'm going to over or understimulate my root chakra space. And every time it comes time to the reset, the reprogramming, the resting state, guess what I'm going to do? I'm going to overexhaust my energy in a state to rest. So I'm going to be looking for this when we think about being overly stimulated, constant stimulation, constant need to be fed, constantly need to be assured, constant needs of validation. You look at these constant aspects, codependency. All of these things are networks of the system in which you have in place. This is where whenever you hear that, when you hear the conversation, when they're talking about, yo, you need to have that time with yourself to heal, until I really was like, let me look at this shit, what healing really is. I know how I am when it comes to systems. And I was like, there's really no play-by-play. There is a play-by-play. There are methodologies. There are exercises that can be put in place. There are questions that can be asked, but they have to be put in place and actually shown and demonstrated. Because that's all that I do as your guide. That's all that I do as your advisor. That's all I do as your mentor. That's all I do as your therapist. That's all I do is I provide and demonstrate the modalities. We have the conversation. We have the conversation around your feelings towards that modality. towards that exercise, towards that process. We break down the story behind the story, behind the story, behind the event, behind the day, behind the moment, behind the time, and we bring them to the present. Until we assess any of those things, you're not going to, because then we look about the systems. Let's talk about the systems that be in place. Most of the systems that you're used to connecting to are based on fear. Most of your systems are based on keeping things hidden. Most of the systems that we have become acquired to are to keep things hidden. There is nothing wrong with keeping things hidden, but it's understanding that hidden goes in two different levels. Hidden based on fear is the distraction or the detrimental or not embracing the natural detrimental process of degeneration that comes into the germination process of developing something new. I'm going to slow that down and say it one more time. In the aspect when we were used to everything being hidden, when we're thinking about being hidden, it came from a state of suppressing or repressing. So most of the times when you went into those spaces of facilitating, going to the solar space, the aspect of your actions, it was based to further repress or further suppress. I don't want to suppress this anymore, but I don't want to bring it to the surface. That means you have not stepped into the aspect of zoning and repopulating. That's looking at the seeds. That's looking at the space. That's looking at the grounds in which I plant my seeds. My seeds are now hidden. They're away from plain view. You cannot see what I have planted. You will not see what I have planted until it is grown. You will not see what it is grown until this process is about 90 days. You will see that in my transparency, honesty being transparency, that in my vulnerability, I understood that I needed to remain in that vulnerable state, not as a prerequisite to say, okay, cool, yeah, I exposed my vulnerability. No, my vulnerability is the space in which my comprehension is at its highest. I understand that in my vulnerability, my self-awareness will always become to its highest. I understand that my comprehension, my communication, my learning, my observing is always going to be in that state of being vulnerable. It won't operate outside of vulnerability because vulnerability is where I'm the most aware. Vulnerability is where I'm the most online. Vulnerability is where I'm the most sensitive. I understand my sensitivities based on I understand the levels of my sensitivities based on my standard operating agreements that I've created and how my sensitivities work in those spaces. I understand that everybody is not about my system. My system is to change for me, but my infrastructure is going to change based on others' levels of perception. You know what I'm saying? As you're coming into that space and we're turning that, as we turn that aspect, it changes the way that we process. It changes the way that we learn. It changes the way that we facilitate. It changes those conversations. As we start to change those conversations that we're having with ourselves in our self-care, self-love routine, we begin to groom new modalities, new modalities based on momentum and infrastructures that help us that when it does come into our space, we're ready for it. Your manifestation is only based on what you're ready for. That's comprehension. Comprehension is if you're not in your current space, understanding why you're in your current space and it's deeper than surface, that means you're in that current space. You're not going to be able to get to the root of a lot. There's a reason that you're in that space. It's because at the root of it, there's things that you're not saying, conversations that you're not having, things that you're not saying, actions that you're not acting on. You're not honoring yourself in certain ways. So you mean to tell me if you're not honoring yourself in your day to day here, you want to go to another space to where the level of the frequency is going to be higher. So it's going to distort your harmony with yourself. So you mean to say you want to go on the you want to go on a vacation, but halfway through the vacation, just when you think about halfway through the vacation, let's say you took that week, halfway through that week, if not the entire time, but halfway through that week, consciously you start worrying about All right, cool. When I get back to work, I got to do this, and this. I got to make this money. I got to pay this, and this. You mean you went into that space unready? You went into that space unresolved? This is how we look at the certain levels of the space that we create based on a level of unresolved. This is how we create those spaces. I'm so used to doing it. I'm so ready. Are you really? These are the questions that I ask within the sessions. These are the questions that we break down within classes. These are the sessions we break down within readings. These are the sessions that we break down within any of my services. Going to do a quick little recap for what we said in the beginning. This week, up until Thursday, you have the chance to book your consultation. You have the chance to book, gift, whatever it may be, the consultation for $90 with Papa. 3-hour virtual conversation. It doesn't have to be 3 hours in the same day. We can break it down, split it up, hit me in the inbox to get it to work. And you can, let's say you can book that at that price up until Thursday. Because after Thursday, it goes back to its original price of $125. I suggest you hop in on that deal because that gets you into the space of getting into the class coming on August 5th. Active clients, is $90. For active clients, it's $60 now. It was $50. It went up $10. It's going to go up gradually until up to the 2 weeks before. And for non-clients, it's $160. So think about the investment into yourself. Invest $90 into yourself now to get yourself ready onto a space to get a benefit of sitting in a class with my clients as well as others to have your first initial space of experiencing what this space is. This is why I desire you to be the fucking best. Healing is destructive. Faith without works is dead. You are deserving, but you're not entitled. That faith without that work is dead. That level of honesty that is very important and very beneficial is going to be based in that transparency of understanding that only in my vulnerability is I'm going to be at my highest point. That means I must feel. That means I must be able to feel and learn where I need to regulate. I must learn my conversations that I don't know how to process. I must learn, okay, cool. I must look at what I've normalized my entire life. These are those levels and aspects in that space that I offer to give to you, but only based on your dedication to yourself. If you're not dedicated to you, I'm going to be doing what I do regardless. I'm going to be doing what I do regardless. I'm working with my clients. I'm going to be putting out products. I'm going to be doing everything that I said I needed to do. Because I set my program, my purpose, to my systems, to everything that I need to do to put in place. You feel what I'm saying? I will only be able to meet you where you're at. But you got to acknowledge the truth of where you're at in order for us to get to where you want to go. And where you want to go is outside of what you can fathom now. I promise you. That's one thing I can promise. I guarantee and promise that where you are to be is outside of anything that you can fathom. Trust this process. But I'm about to go some grounding in, get set up. I got some sessions to knock out. And yeah, I desire you to be the best. If you tuned into this video, today's reading special is for $12.12. It's $12.12. If you're interested in that aspect, starting that way through that gateway, through that reading, go ahead and slide in and hit me in the inbox and we can set that up for throughout the week. I love you. We love us. Ashe.